everyone and welcome back to the series many of you watch because you are too lazy to read and or look at pictures. There is also a small portion of you that are here just to know my opinion, and the rest of you are going to watch this video anyway because you're awesome. Today, not only do we have a new issue to cover, but we also need to talk about some theories. So without further ado, let's get on it. The issue 4 of the Zed comic starts right where the issue 3 ended, which is where Zed found out that there are bombs hidden all around the place. At the beginning of issue 4, again it shows us the map. However, besides Temple of Conjul, the only place on the map is Nenthi, so it will not be hard to guess where this entire comic takes place. It is port of Nenthi, in the present days. At the start, Zed talks about an analogy which Master Kusho used to teach him. Master Kusho always said that beetles were born to battle. They were too heavy to stay on a web, so they had to survive by fighting. Moths on the other side were born to die, and by resisting they only tangle themselves in webs, and they suffer even more before the spider comes. Kusho also asked Zed how many moths did he save, and Zed said none, because he had killed the spider the first day. This analogy was revealed here because it fits this comic really well. Zed isn't here to save the individuals, but he's here to kill the spider that is eating everyone. In this case, the spider being Jin. As I mentioned before, at this point Zed already knows that Jin hid traps all over the city. A really cool detail is that Zed also talks about the maid, which is one of the 4 of Jin's known victims. Zed heard that the maid's flesh was turned into a flower. Of course, just in case you forgot or if you don't know, this entire comic series is based on a story we already know. When Jin was released, he also got an extra story to push his story forward. In that story, Shen and Zed were hunting down Jin, Jin managed to kill a couple of people, and then Jin escaped on a boat. The quote, "the dead maid's flesh was turned into some sort of a flower," was taken directly from that story. Anyway, because Zed knew that Jin already had everything set up, he started looking for possible ways out. All the traps were placed in such a way to give Jin a safe distance to escape. This made him realize that the traps were actually leading to the docks. Presumably that's where Jin could escape. And what was even more peculiar is that Zed realized that before any ship left the docks, they always rang a bell 4 times. And since everyone knows that Jin is obsessed with the number 4, it became obvious he was going to detonate all the bombs at the 4th ring. But then Zed noticed Jin in the crowd. And since the gong already started ringing, Zed knew he had no time to spare. He had to decide quickly. He could shout at the crowd and warn them about the bombs. This way he could save a couple of lives. But if he spends too much time saving moths, the spider would move on. And so instead of warning anyone, he went straight for Jin. At the 2nd ring, Shen, who remember was also present in the city, noticed Zed. And because Shen is Shen, he went straight for Zed without asking. After all, he did say that the next time they would meet, he would kill him. A really interesting detail is that as Zed is using shadows to jump around, Shen is using the spirit realm to catch up with him. That's why behind Zed you can see all these little shadow gates, and behind Shen you can see gates through the spirit realm. So presumably the gate shown in the portal here is from the building before. Anyway, as Zed continues chasing Jin, he tries to tell Shen to warn everyone about the bombs. It was an obvious trap, and yet Shen didn't care. He went straight for Zed anyway. But then, at the 4th ring, exactly what Zed thought would happen, happened. The traps went off, and the port of Nenthi was now in flames. And exactly as it was told in the story that inspired this comic, Jin was now ready at his ship, with the bridge cutting off, giving him a safe distance to escape. Fortunately, our 2 stone-brained heroes managed to take cover, and Jin enjoyed his art. For a while, Zed just floated there in the water, before he suddenly remembered Shen. When he got above the water, he had another decision to make. Jin's ship was right at the edge of Zed's dash. It wasn't guaranteed, but there was the chance to catch up with Jin. But instead of taking chances, Zed dove down and picked up Shen, which is most likely the only reason why Shen survived. Zed saved his most hated enemy and his closest friend. Meanwhile, as Nenthi was in flames, Akali reveals something we've been waiting for. She asked the locals where was the ship that Jin was on heading. It took them a while to realize what she was talking about, but then they told her that the ship was heading across the sea, to Piltover. And this is big, because not only does it mean that we were right in the last comic, where we were talking about how this comic will probably end, but this also means that the Awakened cinematic is finally becoming canon. Because as far as we know, the Awakened cinematic was inspired by stories that could be canon. It was an exploration of future stories. The thing is that Riot realized that the stories told there are actually pretty good, and now they are trying to make them canon. And since now it is 100% finally confirmed that Jin is heading to Piltover, that means that he will likely enjoy the local operas, in his own little way, and Camille will have to step in. Anyway, before we move forward, I quickly want to mention the faces that you see here. Not only can you see one here, but you can see more stone heads at the beginning of the comic. Although these could be just buildings that are shaped to look like heads, these are most likely the ancient Titan statues. Lately, with all the new Ionian stories, Riot keeps mentioning the Titans. They were mentioned here, they were mentioned in the story of Akali and Faye, and they play a role in the book, Realms of Runeterra. So these are getting more and more important. All we know is that millennia ago, before any kind of human history was even beginning, there were the mysterious Titans. Something happened and the Titans disappeared, and all that was left behind are their giant statues and weapons. And I believe that these two heads are actually also remains of these giant statues. It has no meaning for this comic, but because it is becoming obvious that Riot has some future plans with these Titans, remember that they appeared here as well. But now let's keep going. As the ship moves out, Jin is getting sad because the real show is about to begin, and that he always gets the worst seats for these kinds of shows. Which means that blowing up the port wasn't the main thing he wanted to do. The real show that Jin is talking about is turning Zed against Shen. And right after Jin mentioned that, we get a shot of Zed and Shen on the shores. Because Shen has no more than a seat instead of his brain. Before anyone said anything, he shouted at Zed to draw his weapons, because as he promised, he was going to kill him. At that point, Zed snapped. Just moments ago, possibly hundreds have died, and they had to help them. More than that, they had to prevent more of this happening, so they had to stop Jin. But Shen didn't care, and he attacked Zed anyway. Shen told Zed that Jin planned all of this. Zed was his audience. Jin knew that Zed would follow him, and he would attack him even. And it was only because of Zed that all those traps were laid down. In Shen's eyes, this entire disaster happened only because of Zed. If Zed stayed hidden somewhere in the mountains like Shen told him before, not only would none of this happen, but Jin would be forced to look for Zed. And that's where they could have gotten him. Zed tried to reply that Jin was working for someone else. But Shen didn't care about that. He kept repeating that all of this kept happening because of Zed. All of these people died because of Zed. To which Zed replied that a lot more will die. It was the rule of scales, which Master Kusho taught him about. But Shen said that these rules didn't apply here. One should act only when it's needed. That's how you balance out the scales. But Zed was taking action not because it was the right course, but he was taking action because he was too afraid to wait. He had no patience, and he was afraid everything would get even worse. It was because of his impatience that Jin came here. And Shen repeated again that the right option was to wait for Jin in the forests. By following Jin, they only keep walking into traps. That's how Zed keeps failing the Kinko. And that's how he failed Shen and his master. And it was in that moment where Zed was broken on the ground that the story cuts into the past. Here we get a part from 21 years ago, which means it is happening before anything else we have seen so far. These are the first memories of Zed and Shen together. There, young Master Kusho questioned a boy who was working at a palace. This boy has been serving at the kitchens for 2 years now, and yet none has accepted him as an apprentice. And so Master Kusho decided to be the first to give him a chance. He told the young boy, who we now know is Zed, to spar with his son, who of course was Shen. Of course everyone knew that Shen would win that fight. He was a trained Kinko, while Zed in that moment was still nobody. But Zed still decided to give the fight his all, because this was the only chance to be accepted as someone's apprentice. And so as the fight started, Zed kept getting knocked down again and again. But after each fall, he was determined to get back up. It got to a point where Shen himself wasn't sure if they should keep fighting. If they kept going, Zed's life would be endangered. But again, Zed had nothing to lose. This was his only way to become somebody. And so he just kept getting up. When he was at the point where he could barely stand up, Kusho gave him a hint. He told young Zed to be patient, to guard himself and make his enemy work for him. All he needed to do was to find one mistake to win. And just like that, with one quick turn, Zed saw an opening, and one solid punch managed to get Shen on the ground. In Zed's eyes, this was an amazing victory. And Master Kusho agreed that Zed had some strength, and he said that he would gladly accept him as his student. What Zed didn't know back then, and what he learned many years later, is that Shen allowed him to punch him on purpose. It was because Shen allowed Zed to win that Zed managed to become somebody at the end. In fact, if you really think about it, the entire story of Zed, Shen and Master Kusho happened because young Shen was kind-hearted. Anyway, then we cut back to present days. Zed tried to reason with Shen. Both clearly had the power to kill each other, but Zed didn't want to use his shadows. But then Shen snapped that although he is using shadow clones all the time, he never really looked at the shadows' faces, which of course made Zed look for the first time. And it was there when he saw what the shadows represented. He saw the shadows taking shape of Jin and Master Kusho. And Shen explained that it is his guilt and hatred that is giving shape to the shadows. In fact, the shadows don't serve Zed, they control him. And as Zed stayed there frozen in shock, it gave Shen enough time to knock Zed on the ground, knocking him unconscious. Shen kept shouting questions. Master Kusho and Shen raised Zed as their family, and yet he killed Master Kusho in the end. To Shen, Zed was like his brother. That's why he wanted to know why did he have to kill his father. Zed didn't reply, because his consciousness was drifting away. But all he thought is that the answer isn't so simple. This of course means that our previous theory could still be right. I don't think Zed killed Master Kusho because he wanted to be the evil person. I think he was forced to do it. All we know is that inside the temple, Zed and Master Kusho were there to deal with the box that contained the secrets to the shadow techniques. I still believe that the two opened the box, but the shadows tried to claim Kusho. That's how Zed might have been forced to kill him. I don't think he wanted to do it. I think he was forced to do it. And this line certainly supports that theory. Anyway, in the last page of the comic, Cain and the Yan Lei, which is a name for Zed's followers, watched what happened from a distance. One of the followers asked Cain if they should intervene, but Cain replied to not bother. It was already too late. Zed was unconscious, and the Kinko had him as a prisoner. Surprisingly, Shen didn't order to execute Zed, which is what he wanted to do originally. Here he just mentions that they will tie him in chains and null scrolls, which block you from casting any spells. The plan was to burn all the shadow magic from his body, and then they would just leave him rotting in a cell. And after that, at the very end, after witnessing what happened, Cain realized he was the new Master of the Shadows. Which of course is a tie-in to the last comic, where Zed said that should anything happen to him, Cain would be the successor. And that's the end of issue 4. Two really interesting things were revealed here. First of all, this issue ended the story that we already knew about. We knew that Jin would escape and that he would potentially travel to Piltover. Both of these were confirmed here, which means that whatever happens in issue 5, it will be something new to us. We have no idea what will happen next. All we know is that according to Awaken, somewhere in the future, Jin will start chaos in Piltover, and Camille will be forced to step out of the shadows and deal with him. However, I don't think that's what issue 5 will be about. I think that comic will be about Zed, how he's chained inside a Kinko's temple. But most importantly, I think issue 5 will finally reveal what happened at the Kinko monastery. Maybe we finally learn how did Master Kusho die. To close this video, there is one more important theory I want to mention. With this comic revealing that Jin is moving to Piltover, Riot is setting up some cool connections between Ionia and Piltover, which plays really well into the last story we read. A story where Akali's childhood friend lost her leg, and now they were on a mission to find a way to make her walk again. Of course, the easiest way to replace someone's leg would be in Piltover. So, here's my theory. What if Faye moved to Piltover? There, she meets Jin. Jin would take Faye as her apprentice. Which wouldn't be improbable because Faye's mind is already scarred pretty heavily. She almost went crazy after she realized how she lost her leg. But the reason why I'm even mentioning this is because this would fit the next champion really well. The chances of this happening are really low at this point, because it sounds absolutely insane. But if Faye meets Jin in Piltover, maybe Faye would take on some of Jin's customs. Maybe she would also wear a mask, which would explain why the next champion is supposed to be masked. But on top of that, the other hint for the next champion is the phrase, "Some demons should remain in the past." But in this case, the demon wouldn't be a literal demon from Runeterra. The demon from the past would be Kada Jin, the golden demon. Again, the chances of this actually happening are pretty slim. But I have to admit, Riot is setting up Ionia and Piltover really well. It's almost guaranteed that something between these two nations will happen. Although, we still have no idea what. But seeing how successful Jin is as a champion, and seeing how Jin is obsessed with specific numbers, The next two champions are supposed to be released together, and they are going to be champions number 149 and 150. Now I'm no designer, but 150 could definitely bring us a new numerophile. 4. Hey, did you know that we have social media and Twitch where we talk about other League facts and stories? And did you know that we have Need mugs and shirts too? The links to all of that will be below. And as always, thank you, come again.